Hi there, welcome back, or welcome for the very first time. You're safe now. This is your time to rest. Let go of your day. Let your breath slow down and your thoughts float gently away. Tonight I'll be reading you a fairy tale, an old story wrapped in moonlight and carried on a quiet breeze just for you. So snuggle in, get cozy, and let the soft rhythm of the story guide you into dreams. Let's begin. Story 14. The Welshery and the Normans. Though their land has been many times invaded, the Welsh have never been conquered. Powerful tribes like the Romans, Saxons, and Normans have tried to overwhelm them. Even when English and German kings attempted to crush their spirit and blot out their language and literature, the Welsh resisted and won victory. Among the bullies that tried force instead of justice and played the slave driver rather than the Good Samaritan's way were the Normans. These brutal fellows, when they thought they had overrun Wales with their armies, began to build strong castles all over the country. They kept armed men by the thousands ready night and day to rush out and put to end anybody and everybody who had a weapon in his hand. Often they burned whole villages and ended so many Welsh people that it seemed at times as if they expected to empty the land of its inhabitants. Thus, they hoped to possess all the acres for themselves. They talked as if there were no people so refined and so cultured as they were, while the natives, good and bad, were lumped together as the Welshery. Yet at this time, with these hundreds of strong castles bristling with turrets and towers, no Englishman's life was safe. If he dared to go out alone, even 20 rods from the castle, he was instantly ended by some angry Welshmen lying in ambush. So the Normans had to lock themselves up in armour until they looked like lobsters in their shells. When on their iron-clad horses, they resembled turtles, so that if a knight fell off, he had to be chopped open to be rid of his metal clothes. Yet all this was in vain, for when the Norman marched out in bodies or rode in squadrons, the Welshery kept away and were hidden. Even the birds and beasts noticed this, and saw what fools the Normans were to behave so brutally. As for the fairies, they met together to see what could be done. Even the reptiles shamed men by living together more peaceably. Only the beasts of prey approved the Norman way of treating the Welsh people. At last it came to pass that after the long war of the Roses, when the Reds and the Whites had fought together, a Welsh king sat upon the throne of England. Henry VIII was of Cymric ancestry, and his full name was Henry Tudor, or, in English, Henry Theodore. Among the Welsh, every son to his own name as a child, such as Henry, William, Thomas, etc., added that of his father. Thus it happens that we can usually tell a man by his name. For example, Richards, Roberts, Evans, Joneses, etc., etc., that he is a Welshman. When a Welshman went to England to live, if he were a sister's son, he usually added a syllable showing this, as in the case of Jefferson, which means sister's son. Our great Thomas Jefferson used to boast that he could talk Welsh. So the living creatures of all sorts in Wales human beings, fairies, and animals took heart and plucked up courage when a Tudor king, Henry VIII, sat on the throne. Now it was Puck who led the fairies. Now it was Puck who led the fairies as the great peacemaker. He first went to visit all the most ancient creatures in order to find out who should be offered the post of honour as ambassador to be sent to the great king in London, Henry Tudor, to see what could be done for Wales. First he called on the male eagle, oldest of all birds. Though not bald-headed like his American cousin, the Welsh eagle was very old, and at that time a widower. Although he had been father to 9 generations of eaglets, he sent Puck to the stag. This splendid creature, with magnificent antlers, lived at the edge of the forest, near the trunk of an oak tree. It was still standing, but it was now a mere shell. Old men said that the children of the Aborigines played underneath it, and here was the home of the god of lightning, which they worshipped. So to the withered oak Puck went, and offered him the honour of leadership to the embassy to the king. But the stag answered and said, "Well, I do remember when an acorn fell from the top of the parent oak. Then for 300 years it was growing. Children played under it. They gathered acorns in their aprons, and the archers made bows from its boughs. Then the oak tree began to die, and during nearly 30 tens of years it has been fading. I have seen it all. Yet there is one older than I. It is the salmon that swims in the Schlin stream there. Inquire there." So of the old mother salmon Puck went to ask, and this was the answer which he received. "Count all the spots on my body, and all the eggs in my roe, 1 for each year. Yet the blackbird is even older than I. Go listen to her story. She excels me in both talk and fact." And the blackbird opened its orange-coloured bill and answered proudly, "Do you see this flinty rock on which I am sitting? Once it was so huge that 300 yoke of oxen could hardly move it, yet today it hardly more than affords me room to roost on. What made it so small, do you ask? Well, all I have done to wear it away has been to wipe my beak on it every night before I go to sleep, and in the morning brush it with the tips of my wing." Even Puck, fairy though he was astonished at this, but the blackbird added, "Go to the toad that blinks its eye under the big rock yonder. His age is greater than mine." The toad was half asleep when Puck came, but it opened with alertness its beautiful round bright eyes, set in a rim of gold. Then Puck asked the question, "O thou that carriest a jewel in thy head, are there any things alive that are older than thou art?" "That I could not be sure of, especially if as many false things are told about them as are told about me. But when I was a tadpole in the pond, that old hag of an owl was still hooting away in the tree-tops, scattering children, as in ages gone. She is older than I. Go and see her. If age makes wise, she's the wisest of all." Puck went into the forest, but at first saw no bird answering the description given him. He said to himself, "She is, I wonder, who?" He was surprised to hear his question repeated, not as an echo, but by another. Still, he thought, it might possibly be his own voice coming back. So, in making a catalogue in his notebook of of what he had seen and heard that day, he put down 2 wit, 1 echo. Again came the sound, 2 wit, 2 who, 2 wit, 2 who, sounded the voice. Thinking this was intended to be a polite question, Puck looked up. Sure enough, there was a wise bird sitting on a bough above him, as sober as a judge. "Who, did you ask?" answered Puck, and then went on to explain. "I am the Lord of the Fairies in Welshery, and I seek to know which is the most venerable of all the creatures in the land of the Red Dragon. I am ready to salute you as the most ancient and honourable of all living things in the Cymric realm. You are desired to bear a message to the great king in London." Tickled by such delicate flattery, and to the honours proffered her, this Lady Owl, after much blinking and winking, flirting and fluttering, at last agreed to go to King Henry VIII in London. The business which she was charged was to protest against the Norman brutality and to plead for justice. Now this old Lady Owl, grey with centuries, though she had such short ears, kept them open by day, and during the night also, for all the gossip that floated in the air. She knew all about everybody and everything. From what she had heard, she expected to find the new King Henry VIII, a royal fellow in velvet, with a crown on his head, and his body as big and round as a hogshead, sitting in a room full of chopping blocks and battle axes. Further, she fancied she would find a dozen pretty women locked up in his palace, some in the cellar, others in the pantry, and more in the garret, but all waiting to have their heads chopped off. For the popular story ran that his chief amusement was to marry a wife one day and slice off her head the next. It was said also that the king kept a private graveyard and took a walk in it every afternoon to study the epitaphs, which he kept a scholar busy in writing, and also a man from the marble yard nearby to chisel them on the tombs after his various wives had been properly beheaded. But the owl never could find out whether these fables were wicked fibs, or fairy tales, or only street talk. Puck and the owl together arrived in London at the palace when the king was at his dinner. The butlers and lackeys wanted to keep them out, but the merry monarch gave orders to let them in at once. He made the owl perch over the mantelpiece, but told Puck to stand upon the dinner table and walk over the tablecloth. The pepper box was put away so that he should not sneeze, and the king carefully removed the mustard pot, for fear the little fairy fellow might fall in it and be drowned in the hot stuff. His Majesty said, for the time being, Puck should be the Prince of Wales. Puck strutted about to the amusement of the king and all the court ladies, but kept away from the pepper, which made his nose tingle, and from the hot soup, for fear he might tumble into it and be scalded. When the dessert came, Puck hid himself under a walnut shell, just for fun. It would take too long to tell all that was said, or the questions which the king asked about his Welsh subjects, and which either the owl or the ferryman answered. According to Puck's story, Wales was then a most distressful country, though the Welshery, to a man, wanted to be good and loyal subjects of the Tudors. Several times did Puck appeal to the owl to have his story confirmed, and because this wise bird had lived among the Cymry centuries even before the Normans came. The owl every time blinked, bowed, and answered solemnly, "To whit, to who? To whit, to who?" Which, in this case, showed she had learned to speak the court language. "Why, bless my soul, the owl speaks good Cockney Hinglish," whispered one of the butlers who had been born in Wales. "Yes, but that is the proper way to address His Majesty, King Henry the Eighth," answered the other butler, who was a native-born Londoner. Puck and the owl returned to Wales, and what happened after that is the ABC of history that everybody knows, and for which all the Welsh people to this day bless the Tudors, who made the Welsh equal before the law with any and all Englishmen. Even Puck himself had never seen anything like the change that quickly took place for the better, nor did Queen Mab, with her wand, ever work such wonders. It was better than a fairy tale, and the effects were very soon seen, which were even more wonderful. Down went the castles into ruins for rats to run around in, and wild dogs to yelp, and foxes to hide in or look out of the casements. Today, what were once banqueting halls are covered with moss, and on the ground grass grows, over which sheep graze and children play, while rooks and crows nest or roost in the tall towers. Any Englishman's life was safe anywhere, and Wales became one of the most easily governed countries in all the wonderful British Empire. And in the Great World War that even children who read these stories can remember, Wales, the land of the free and home of the endless democracy, led all the British Isles, colonies, islands, or coaling stations around the wide world in loyalty, valor, and sacrifice. And when the handsome son of the king, George, the Prince of Wales, led the descendants of Welsh archers, now called Fusiliers, they went into battle singing, "Old land our fathers before us held so dear," or they marched following the band that played the Men of Harlech. It is because the Welsh cherish their traditions, harps, music, language, and noble inheritance with which they feed their souls, and that they lead the 4 nations of the British Isles in the nobler virtues that keep a nation alive, as well as in the sweet humanities of the Red Cross and in generous hospitality to the refugee Belgian. True to his motto, "I serve," the Prince of Wales, who came to see us in 1919, as did his grandfather, whom the storyteller saw when he visited the Independence Hall in 1860, loved to be a servant of his people. And what was it that wrought this peaceful wonder of the 16th century? Was it a fairy spell, magic ointment, star-tipped wands, treasures of caves or ocean depths? Was it anything that dragons, giants, ogres, or even swords, spears, catapults, or whips and clubs, or elves or gnomes could do? Not a bit of it. Only justice and kindness instead of brutality and force, and the wisdom of one wise old owl. The end. The story has ended, but your dreams are just beginning. Let them carry you gently through stars and silence and soft wonder. Thank you for letting me read to you. I'll be here again whenever you need a quiet voice and a gentle tale. Sleep well, sleep deep, and good night, dear dreamer. Breuddwydion melys, dear dreamer, sweet dreams.